Coming up on This Week in Hockey East, we preview a jam-packed men's quarterfinal, and we shout out the UConn Huskies, the Hockey East women's champs, as well. It's all coming up on This Week in Hockey East. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode. Maybe I would say the episode of This Week in Hockey East. We have been rounding into form to get us to the quarterfinals, and we are here after a very chalky Wednesday night. We get set for the quarterfinal Saturday. And Tyler, let's start in on these games. We're looking forward to them. And the one that I think has the most implications outside of just what it means for Hockey East, and that is Providence, the number 4 seed, hosting the University of Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's the 4 seed hosting the 5 seed, 4:05 on NESN Plus Saturday afternoon. And yeah, talking about stakes, both coaches acknowledging that if you lose this game, you're almost definitely out of the pairwise conversation. If you win it, you're not quite in, but man, does it really help out your chances. And of course, a trip to the Garden like all these games have on the line on Saturday. Turns out UMass just needed to match Providence in points last weekend, and they could have hosted this game, but the Friars earned a shootout win over Northeastern, and UMass took a pair of late losses in regulation against Maine, so Providence jumps and stays into that 4 seed. Both coaches talked this week about how similar these two teams are and how tight they've played each other in recent years, and the 2 regular season matchups back it up between UMass and Providence. Minutemen won both back in November. It's 3-2 on the road, game-winning goal from Lucas Mercury in the final minute, and then at home the next night, they win in overtime 2-1 with Ryan Ufko's first of 3 overtime winners this year. And if you want the one-line resume for Ryan Ufko and what he's meant to that team this year, he's the only non-BU or BC guy in the first team All-Hockey East squad. So tip of the cap to Ryan Ufko. But what stands out about those 2 games is that Providence had a lead after 2 periods both nights. They did not have a single loss in those situations either of the previous 2 seasons. It's a hallmark of Nate Lehman's teams. But this year, it's happened 4 times, including those 2 against UMass and 1 against BU, 1 against BC. Nate Lehman said discipline's been a huge factor in that department. They gave BC and BU multiple power plays in the 3rd period in those losses. But it's also about padding the leads. They might have outchanced UMass in their 2 matchups, but they were never able to establish a 2-goal lead or more at any point during either game. So that scoring can come from anywhere from Providence. I mean, they've got 15 different players with at least 10 points this year. UMass is pretty good in that department. They have 11, but no one is as balanced as Providence or New Hampshire in that department with guys at 10-plus points. Nick Poisson had one of his best games of the year with 2 goals on senior night. And keep an eye on Riley Duran. He's had some really big games against UMass in his career. 2 years ago as a freshman, he scored both goals in a 2-1 win. Last year, he had a hat trick at Schneider Arena as part of a 7-4 win. But the X factor might be 5th-year grad student and team captain Cam McDonald. He was not available during the UMass series in November. He was injured. He's back now. He'll be playing in career game number 162 under Nate Lehman, and he does not want it to be his last, so that's going to be a huge lift for Providence with his physicality and his defensive presence. Okay, UMass trying to win their 3rd Hockey East championship in the last 4 years. And when UMass went back-to-back in 21 and 22, they had to get through Providence both times. A 5-2 win in the semifinals on home ice during the COVID-altered tournament, and then a 4-2 win in the quarterfinals on home ice the next year. So they haven't had to go to Schneider Arena for the playoffs since Greg Carvel's first season. Providence swept that first-round series back in 2017. But UMass has already been playing playoff-type hockey for a while now. They've needed wins to get that bye. They wanted wins to get home ice. It just didn't happen. And, of course, they've been playing for these critical pairwise points down the stretch. But more importantly, UMass has played 6 straight 1-goal games. And, again, the 2 they played against Providence were decided by 1 goal back in November. Well, we know about Ryan Ufko and, of course, Scott Morrow, maybe the best blue line scorers outside of Lane Hudson in Hockey East. And Nate Lehman said for all the similarities in this matchup, it is that UMass blue line scoring that can separate the Minutemen a little bit. But I'm going to throw 2 other guys at you to keep an eye on. Paul O'Hara, he's playing some of his best hockey lately. The forward has 6 points in his last 6 games. And 5 of those games have come on a somewhat new line with Jack Musa and Donz Lashmelis. That's the Bruins prospect and the Latvian junior team star. They put those 3 guys together in that second game against BC, where they came this close to pulling off an upset on the road. So O'Hara, Musa, Lashmelis, they're really clicking lately. And then Michael Cameron, he's probably UMass's fastest forward, really good goal scorer, but he was snake bit, hadn't found his way on the score sheet in 13 games. That includes 2 goals that were overturned because of offsides and high stick reviews. But now he's back. He's got points in 2 of his last 3 games. And he's taking on his old high school captain, Luke Chris, in this game, in fact, who plays for Providence. So that'll be fun to watch. But again, pairwise implications. If you lose this game, you're just about finished for an at-large bid. If you win, you really put yourself in the conversation, of course, for the Garden, but also for the NCAA. So plenty on the line at Schneider Arena.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Boston University, who is playing about as well as anyone in the country. And they've been right there with BC all year. And I think this team is feeling pretty confident, but maybe the one team they didn't want to see is Northeastern, who's beaten them in 2 straight games this year. Let's talk about this matchup as Northeastern coming off pretty, dominant 4-0 win, really controlled the game against Merrimack all the way through. Cam Whitehead, the guy that we don't talk about enough, is goalies in Hockey East. That's his 3rd shutout in his last 7 games here for Northeastern. Alex Campbell and that top line was really good on Wednesday. Campbell now has 11 goals in his last 13 games. He had a hat trick in the regular season finale against Providence, by the way. So now we go back to January 26th, Tyler. Northeastern is 8-3-1, including a Beanpot win. Now, a couple of those losses in there were not great, and they were by decent margins, but they bounced back really well against Maine and against Lowell in that stretch. And the big thing is how they've done in ranked games recently. We talked a lot about how Northeastern was hurt early in the season. We know that. In their first 12 games against ranked opponents, they were 1-10-1. A lot of those games were close, but they were not getting over the hump. Since that point, since January 26th, they are 4-1-1 against ranked opponents. So that stands out. And of course, they have 2 wins over BU in that time. All 3 meetings between BU and Northeastern went to overtime this year. All 3 finished a 4-3 final, with Northeastern, of course, winning that January 30th game on a power play winner and then in the Beanpot final. On the BU side, we mentioned it, right? You can't really ask for much more momentum than BU is taking into the playoffs. They've scored 27 goals in their last 5 games. They're averaging 5.4 per game in that time. They're outscoring their opponents 27-6. We mentioned on the show last week, BU's version of their freshman line, right? Ever since Shane LaChance moved up to play with Celebrini and Jack Harvey. Harvey's been with Celebrini a little bit longer, but just since those 3 now have been together, 12 goals, 11 assists, and 54 shots in the last 5 games. But I think what stands out is really not just that line. It's been how it's stretched BU's depth. And that's the thing that line has done, because that line's been really good. Celebrity's been really good all year, but it's stretched the depth. And you look at guys like Quinn Hudson now, who has 5 goals and 2 assists in his last 4 games, 20 shots, by the way, in his last 4. Jeremy Wilmer, 2 goals, 6 assists in his last 5 games. And shout out to Matthew Karam, by the way, as well, who quietly has had a really good year. 18 wins, is tied for the 3rd most ever by a Hockey East goalie in Hockey East regular season games. He's 2nd this year, though, of course, to Jacob Fowler, but he's had a really nice year and he's played well here for a while. Let's just quickly on Macklin Celebrini, a couple of big games here at the end. So he finishes with exactly 1 goal per game in Hockey East play. That is the highest ever by a rookie in Hockey East history. His 23 goals are the most ever by a freshman, 44 points, 5th most ever, tied with that Jack Eichel guy, who was pretty good. We look at the 3 meetings between these 2 teams. BU pretty heavily outshot Northeastern in both games. The power play was a big difference. Each team scored 3 power play goals. In the Beanpot final, shots were 36-17 BU. Expected goals were 4.2 to 1.84. So that was sort of an outlier game that Northeastern was able to find a way to win. Northeastern's been really good not taking penalties this year, the fewest in Hockey East. And the other advantage you have to look for Northeastern, they have been one of, if not the top face-off team in the country all year. But they did not do it against BU this season. In 3 games against against Northeastern, BU was at 52.7 on the face-off. This is a Northeastern team that's over 55% for the season. So that's something to watch as well. If BU can control the face-off, they really limit one of Northeastern's biggest strengths as a team. And we'll see if Tournament Northeastern shows up, because it has quite a bit over the last few years.
Yes, and that pedigree they have, I'm sure it makes BU fans a little bit nervous, but maybe better to get them on home ice if you have to go through Northeastern again than to have to rematch them in the Beanpot, where you're right, they just did absolutely everything they needed to pull off that Beanpot upset. That's a great rivalry for the playoffs. I don't know if it matches the intensity of the rivalry we'll have up in Orono. 3-seed Maine hosting 6-seed UNH. That's a 7 o'clock puck drop on ESPN Plus. A lot of excitement around this one. UNH, great job taking care of business against UMass Lowell. They beat them 3 consecutive games, Friday, Saturday, and then Wednesday in the first round, 1-0. But I want to focus on Maine first because so many important things happened for the Black Bears during that sweep of UMass to finish the regular season. They'd lost 5 of 7 heading into that series, and the Nadeau brothers run a 3-game scoreless drought, their longest of the season. Not only do they get all 6 points from UMass, they do it in the clutch. Thomas Triel, a game-winning goal on the power play with 5 minutes left on Friday. Lyndon Breen gets the game winner with 1:17 left on Saturday. And both Bradley and Josh Nadeau had a goal and an assist on the weekend, so they're into a rhythm heading to the playoffs. And Greg Carvel said this week, UMass's coach, after the losses, he said, the separator in this league is high-end scoring talent, and Maine has it. His quote was, "We played them great for most of the weekend, but if you give the Nadeaus just 2 inches, the puck's in the back of the net." And it feels like Maine's made a decision at goaltender. Albin Boya, he started just 1 game in the first half. It happened to be a win over New Hampshire on December 1st. He started each of the last 6 games during the regular season. Now, in that first start, Boya only had to make 18 saves against UNH. It was a 5-2 win at the Alfond. Josh Nadeau was the headliner. He had a hat trick. Bradley Nadeau had the primary assist on all 3 goals, including 2 on the power play. But when Maine came to the Whittemore Center, UNH, you could tell they were keyed in on Josh Nadeau. He didn't get 3 goals across those 2 games. He only got 1 shot, held off the board, no points, no assists. UNH swept that series 6-2 and 5-2. So keep an eye on how they handle Josh Nadeau and Bradley Nadeau. It's not a perfect science. It's not easy, but they found maybe a way to somewhat keep them in check. But of course, that was on home ice, and they'll be going on the road. We talked about the all-rookie team all week, some well-deserving names on that list. And I don't think a snub exists this year for the all-rookie team, but we'll give you the 3 highest point producers who didn't quite make it. Northeastern's Dylan Ritzkovian, and then 2 guys playing in this game, Maine's Josh Nadeau, and then New Hampshire's Ryan Conmey, who just put together UNH's first 30-point freshman season since James Van Riemsdyk in 2007-2008. Now, yes, these 2 teams faced off in the first round in 2021 in Orono, but no fans were allowed for that game. So Saturday's crowd, it's going to be electric. That goes without saying. And that's why getting the first goal is going to be so important for UNH. They're 15-1 when they score first, and they're 12-0 when leading after 1 period. So can they take control early and lean on a defense that's allowing fewer shots on goal than all but 3 teams in the country? Jakob Helston, the goaltender, just shut out UMass for 9 straight periods. I don't know if you're allowed to do that. You just throw in the 1 goal he allowed against BC on March 3rd. And he has stopped 79 of the last 80 shots he's faced. That's 98.7%. The back end has been phenomenal. How about the top line for UNH? Ryan Conmey, Cy Leclerc, and Liam Devlin. But those first 2 guys, and Devlin's been great. He had a hat trick against Maine at the Whittemore Center. But Conmey and Leclerc are the 2 highest scorers Mike Souza has ever had. Conmey's alone in first. Leclerc is tied with Max Gildon from way back in the early years of the Mike Souza era. So where's the secondary scoring coming from if Maine's able to lock down that top line? They found a new source. It's Harrison Blaisdell. He had 2 goals on Friday, and then the one and only goal in Wednesday's first-round win over UMass Lowell. He's got 11 this year, 10 more than a season ago, and it's not a stroke of luck. It's not a coincidence. He told us recently he had knee surgery right after the end of last year. It's helped him deal with pain he was dealing with for 3 years, including his 2 at North Dakota. Blaisdell skating better, feeling stronger, and he says he's got a feel for the league now in his 2nd year since transferring. So his 3rd line with J.P. Turner and Robert Cronin has really been clicking, and on Wednesday they combined for that gritty down-low tip-in goal you need this time of year. So we know about the high-end scoring, but we always say it, secondary scoring this time of year can really help you out in the playoffs. So we'll see if UNH can keep that rolling.
All right, last one. UConn at Boston College. The Ice Bus is chugging to Boston as UConn gets a victory over Vermont. Really exceptional 3rd period. That was the big thing as they close out that game that was 1-1 after 2 periods. We have to talk about the power play. 2 for 2 with Matthew Wood and Andrew Lucas scoring. That was the first set of power play goals. UConn had not scored on the power play since February 3rd. So that is massive for the Huskies to find that. Beyond that, I know that, it's an empty netter that makes it a 4-goal game and a 4-1 final, but 15 goals over the last 4 games here for UConn. UConn had only scored 7 goals in the prior 7 games. So is the offense coming along a little bit? Big reason why is Matthew Wood. And all you need this time of year is your stars to be stars. And for Matthew Wood, who, by the way, still leads the country in expected goals this year, but the puck just had not been going in, Tyler, but now it is. Had a hat trick against Northeastern on March 1st. He has 6 goals in his last 4 games. So that is a dangerous thing to watch if you're UConn, because we know Matthew Wood has the potential to be one of the best scorers in the league. I thought Boston College really dug deep against Merrimack last week. They were down 2-0 middle of the second period. It was not going great, but they found 2 shorthanded goals in a row, tied the game, and ended up going from there. And once again, the offensive output was there. We still don't know whether we're going to see Gabe Perreault this weekend. We still don't know whether we're going to see Will Vogt this weekend. Greg Brown has said not season ending, but they're monitoring things. But it has made a difference. I mean, there's no other way to say this. In the last 4 games, since Gabe Perreault's been out, Boston College has just 1 for 12 on their power play. But they keep winning. And when you move Cutter Gauthier up, and he's played with Will Smith and Ryan Leonard, those guys have played really well. The depth scoring, though, especially that showed up against Merrimack, but it does stand out. And how about Eamon Powell, by the way? You mentioned the top scoring D guys in the league. Eamon Powell has a point in 12 straight games, and he has 18 points in his last 12. So talk about a senior captain rising to the top. A couple of big picture notes. We could go all day about Boston College and all of these records that this team has had and the chances for what this special season could be. But you got to take care of business in the playoffs, and we'll see if Boston College can do that. These teams have not played in forever, it feels like. It was back in November. It was a really good game that went to overtime. Cutter Gauthier, game-winning goal on November 17th. Then Boston College shut out UConn at Toscano the next day on Saturday. One final note, I'm calling this a little Sharky nugget for the, everyone looking at trying to get the best insight on this game. Boston College is the only one of the 4 schools hosting this weekend where their students are on campus. Boston College's spring break was a week earlier than the other 3 schools. It's normally this week. It's just kind of the luck of the draw, but BC's was a week earlier. So this should be a pretty good atmosphere, and the BC students have shown up all year. So just something to note here. You would expect it to be a real home ice advantage for Boston College, and it should be fun, as all these other quarterfinals will be. That will be 7:30 Saturday night on NESN.
Fantastic. A couple of staggered puck drops. Should be a great afternoon and evening of hockey. Eric, take us home here with a few short shifts, maybe just one here this week. They're always presented by the Shift Group, helping elite athletes and veterans become elite sales professionals. Of course, a classic championship game, Huskies against Huskies, setting the stage for a national tournament. UConn hopes is a run. What stood out to you from a great title game at Toscano Family Ice Forum?
Yeah, congratulations to UConn. I mean, obviously disappointing last night, but the wrap up, just a wonderful season, getting to the NCAA tournament, as you said. And I just thought it was, we talked about it on the show last week. I don't know how to separate these teams. They seem really even. Well, I think that played out, didn't it? It was about as even it could possibly be. And by the way, shout out to Gwyneth Phillips on the other side for Northeastern. 51 saves is the most ever in a women's final. And it's the most ever in a men's or women's final that did not go multiple overtimes. So I think she's going to make a PWHL team very happy coming up next season. Should be fun. We're going to have all the action for you this weekend, and we will be back to preview a semifinal next week. Can't wait. Hockey East quarterfinal week on the men's side on This Week in Hockey East.